When you drive across the Bay Bridge and feel the atmosphere of the Eastern Shore, it grabs hold of you. You don't want to leave. And something about it keeps you. Seabrook is a quaint, historic town nestled on the Chesapeake Bay's eastern shore. Just outside its limits sits Watersedge Retreat, a secluded haven made for romantic weekends. Couples come here to sit by the water, watch the sunrise and sunset, just a quiet place to reconnect. But on Valentine's Day weekend, 1998, the mood at Watersedge Retreat turns from romantic to horrifying. A woman frantically reports her room is on fire. Her name is Dana Whitaker, and she's panicked. Her husband, Landon Whitaker, is still trapped inside. Resort staff race to the scene and manage to break into the smoke-filled room. Flames lick the air. Lying near the bed, they find Landon and pull him out. By the time first responders arrive, it's too late. He's gone. Landon Whitaker was only 35 years old. It looked as if he had either fallen asleep in bed or passed out next to it while smoking. On the nightstand were beer bottles. A risque magazine lay on the floor. A pack of cigars had one missing. Maybe he dropped a lit cigar. Maybe the place just went up. To everyone, it looked like a tragic accident. A loss to mourn. Dana Whitaker had just lost her husband of 9 years, and the father of their young daughter. Landon had always been described as a gentle bear. Rough exterior, muscular build, but loyal to a fault. Protective. Soft-hearted. I met Landon back in junior high, one of his best friends, Connor Wells, said. We played football and basketball together and stayed close after school. He had your back, no matter what. Connor and his wife introduced Landon to Dana. The couples hit it off immediately. Best friends who spent holidays, birthdays, and long weekends together. We were all like family, Connor's wife Jenna said. When we got the call about the fire, that Landon had died, we dropped everything. The drive to Watersedge Retreat felt endless. When they arrived, Dana was in the room, sitting beside her brother, her face buried in her hands, sobbing. I just couldn't imagine what she was going through, Jenna said. It was awful. Landon's badly burned body was sent for autopsy, performed by forensic pathologist Dr. Thomas Greer. In Maryland, most autopsies happen within 24 hours, especially when the cause appears simple, like an accidental fire. The working theory. A tragic mistake. Just bad luck. But as Dr. Greer began the exam, local detectives started interviews, with hotel guests, staff, and the couple who had pulled Landon from the room. They recalled finding him slumped near the bed, legs extended out, upper body severely burned. Oddly, his lower body was untouched. That suggested something strange. There was fourth-degree charring, Dr. Greer explained. You don't usually see that with living victims. First degree is reddening. Second is blistering. Third, skin begins to peel. Fourth means charring. That's deep, often past the skin, into the bone. It raised a red flag. When bodies are that badly burned, it's difficult to immediately detect external injuries. Without high suspicion, key evidence could be missed. Investigators questioned Dana again. She told them their marriage had been strained. The Valentines trip? A last-ditch effort to fix things. She said Landon had been drinking that night, and when they got back to the room, he wanted to be intimate. But she insisted they'd agreed. This was going to be a no-sex weekend. Just talking. Healing. They argued. Dana got angry and stormed out, driving off into the cold night. When she returned, she claimed smoke greeted her as she opened the door. She screamed for help. Fire crews arrived, pulled Landon from the room, but it was too late. Dr. Greer initially believed Landon had died from toxic fumes. Carbon monoxide, maybe. That would show up in a simple blood test. He ordered one. Half an hour later, results came back, negative. That surprised him. Looking at photos of the room, soot-covered walls, blackened ceiling, Dr. Greer expected to find soot in Landon's airway. That would mean he was breathing when the fire started. But during the full autopsy, there was none. No carbon monoxide. No soot in the lungs. That meant only one thing. Landon was already dead before the fire began. The case shifted. This was no longer an accidental fire. It was a suspicious death. Dr. Greer began an exhaustive internal exam, looking for trauma or disease. He examined Landon's heart, normal shape, normal size. No blocked vessels. No weakened muscle fibers. He was in great physical shape. There was nothing in there that screamed natural death. Still hunting for a cause, Dr. Greer ordered a full toxicology screening. When it came back, one thing stood out: pesticide. Any pesticide, in a large enough dose, can be lethal. And someone had made sure Landon Whitaker had a deadly amount in his system. At first, it made no sense. Detectives began to wonder, was pesticide somehow connected to Landon Whitaker's death? They re-examined the timeline. Kimberly, Landon's wife, had told detectives their marriage was rocky, and that their Valentine's trip was a last attempt to reconnect. But what investigators hadn't focused on yet was the man who had helped arrange it, Michael Larson, a longtime friend and golf course superintendent at Watersedge Retreat. Michael had given Landon the idea to bring Kimberly to the resort. He even pulled a few strings to help them book a waterfront room. Then came the results from Dr. Greer: large amounts of pesticide in Landon's bloodstream. And as the retreat's greenskeeper, Michael had unrestricted access to chemicals used to maintain the grounds. As one forensic investigator put it, poisoning someone you know is easier. You understand their habits. You know how and where to slip it in without raising suspicion. And the motive? Simple: gain. Whether emotional, financial, or relational, poison is slow, quiet, and deadly. Detectives decided to re-interview Michael. They needed to either implicate him or eliminate him. Michael agreed to talk. He said the last time he spoke to Landon was just days before the trip. "I remember he called me, crying," Michael told detectives. "I'd never heard him like that. He said Kimberly had asked for a divorce." But then, just before the weekend, Michael said Landon called again, hopeful this time. He said things were starting to feel a little better. He wanted to do something romantic. "Told me, you've always been better at this than me. So I said, why not spend Valentine's weekend at the resort? Quiet, waterfront. Could help." Michael's alibi for the night of the fire was solid: home in Easton with his wife and kids. Detectives verified the story quickly. And despite the initial suspicion, Michael proved cooperative. More than that, he became a key resource. As police ruled out Michael, Dr. Greer was still reviewing the toxicology. What he found was disturbing. The pesticide levels in Landon's body were far beyond trace amounts. It was enough to be fatal. But that wasn't all. Among the results, a rare antidepressant not widely prescribed at the time. Over-the-counter flu meds. Muscle relaxants. Anti-anxiety pills. Individually, nothing dramatic. But combined with alcohol, a lethal cocktail. Kimberly had told detectives that Landon had too much to drink that night. But then came the surprise: no alcohol was detected in Landon's blood. None. That raised a major question: were the crime scene bottles staged? Dr. Greer briefly doubted his own findings. He worried samples had been mislabeled. But thankfully, Landon's body had not yet been released. He drew fresh tissue samples and ran the tests again. The results were identical: no alcohol, no carbon monoxide, the usual killers in fire-related deaths. His earlier findings were confirmed. This wasn't accidental. Forensic toxicologists used gas chromatography, a technique that separates and measures molecular compounds. Small molecules exit the analyzer quickly. Larger ones take longer. Each appears on a graph as a spike, revealing the exact chemicals and their quantities. Landon's printout told the truth. There were no signs of smoke inhalation. No signs of alcohol. And the pesticide levels? Lethal. Now, investigators turned back to the people closest to Landon. They interviewed one of Kimberly's best friends, Jenna Wallace. Jenna didn't hold back. She said Kimberly had been confiding in her for months. Back in late '97, Jenna had gotten engaged. At one of her engagement parties, Kimberly met Jenna's cousin, Ethan Marks, a Marine. He was tall, charismatic, and intense. And Kimberly and Ethan started seeing each other almost immediately. Jenna said Kimberly confessed it was more than a fling. The love triangle shocked detectives. Could Ethan have killed Landon just to be with Kimberly? One homicide prosecutor summed it up best: Most murders come from uncontrolled passion, jealousy, sex, or revenge. Love triangles are a dangerous thing. Detectives Gamble and Lloyd paid Ethan Marks a visit. Ethan confirmed the affair. But he told them plainly, it wasn't serious. To me, it was casual. Nothing long-term, Ethan said. Just something physical. He gave them an alibi for Valentine's weekend. He was deployed at a base in South Carolina. Investigators confirmed it quickly. Ethan was nowhere near the retreat, so he was ruled out. But now, the investigation had stalled. Without a clear cause of death, without a suspect, detectives were back to working a puzzle with no picture on the box. Leads were thinning. The media wanted answers. The family needed closure. But behind the scenes, every investigator knew this case was just beginning. Dr. Greer wasn't done yet. Somewhere inside the charred remains of Landon Whitaker was the truth. And someone close, was hiding it. The case had grown increasingly complex. I spent hours conferring with the chief medical examiner. Every week, the department's forensic team would meet to present their most difficult cases, hoping someone else might see a pattern they'd missed. Together, we kept circling the same puzzle, searching for one clean thread of logic to explain Stephen Rico's death. Determined not to let the case go cold, investigators went back to the crime scene, this time with a different question in mind. What role did the fire actually play? The Maryland State Fire Marshal's office joined the investigation. Standard causes, like faulty wiring or space heaters, were quickly eliminated. That left just one odd item in the room, a backwood cigar. To test the theory, fire experts recreated the blaze using the same linens and same brand of cigars found in the rental cottage. But there was a problem. Harbortown was a commercial property, and that meant all bedding had to meet strict fire retardant standards. They weren't supposed to ignite easily, if at all. The test was run again. And again. 3 smoldering cigars were placed on a pillow, the very same point of origin from the original fire. They simply burned themselves out. No flames. No ignition. Friends of Stephen were adamant. He didn't smoke. Not once in all the years they'd known him. So why would Kim say he did? That's when investigators turned their focus. Most accidental fires don't start with cigars, they start with accelerants. Gasoline. Lighter fluid. Something intentional. They brought in a specially trained dog to sniff the scene. It alerted, clearly and immediately, to the presence of accelerants. For the first time, Detective Gamble and his team had a major break. It looked like someone had staged the scene, carefully. Why were cigars and beer bottles present if Stephen hadn't smoked or been drinking? His toxicology showed barely any alcohol. Kim claimed Stephen must have brought the items himself, in the car or in his suitcase. But there was something she hadn't noticed, a price tag. On one of the cigar packs, it read $2.49 plus tax. Gamble began canvassing the area. 25 liquor stores later, he found one that carried the exact brand. The clerk explained they had recently raised the price to $2.99, but hadn't removed the older stickers underneath. That was the link. Now they needed to know who had made the purchase. Over 2 days, Gamble showed photo arrays to every store clerk, each time 6 faces. One included Stephen. One included Kim. One clerk didn't hesitate. She pointed to Kim. She remembered her because she'd asked about her hair color, told her it looked like dye. Kim had snapped, saying it was her natural shade. The clerk remembered the exchange vividly. That placed Kimberly Rico in the store, buying both the beer and cigars that ended up at the crime scene. A direct contradiction of her sworn statement. And a lie. But even with mounting evidence, one major piece was still missing, the cause of death. Natural causes were ruled out. So was any death related to the fire. The burns were superficial. There was no blunt force trauma. No smoke in the lungs. Nothing definitive. Just questions. Investigators believed Kim had killed her husband, but without knowing how, they couldn't make an arrest. Fire is powerful. It erases evidence. It masks timelines. And to some, it's symbolic, a way to not just destroy a body, but a person's entire existence. Kim had no idea just how much they already knew. About the cigars. The beer. The carbon monoxide. The accelerants. So they kept talking to her, softly. Kept drawing her out, waiting for the medical examiner to give them something definitive. Anything. But time kept passing. Stephen's body had been buried. The last viable samples had already been collected. They were at a standstill. And still, no cause of death. The investigators cast a wider net. They reached out to friends, co-workers, anyone in Stephen and Kim's orbit. At first, everyone was reluctant. They insisted it was a terrible accident. Nothing more. Then a call came from Mike, Stephen's closest friend. He said something wasn't right. It didn't sit right. None of it added up. And he didn't believe for a second that Stephen had just died accidentally. That suspicion began to spread. Small towns don't keep secrets well. The doubts crossed the bay, reaching Baltimore, where Kim's old college roommate, Rachel, lived. A mutual friend called, asking Rachel if she could come over. Help support Kim during the investigation. There was a pause on the line. And Rachel answered simply, "No, I'm not coming over." Instead of going to support Kim, Rachel went straight to the police. She told them something chilling. Kimberly had once confided in her that she needed to get rid of Stephen. Not only that, she had a plan. She said she had access to a drug that couldn't be detected and described the entire scenario over drinks one evening. Rachel had brushed it off at the time, assuming it was just alcohol-fueled talk. But now, in the wake of Stephen's death, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Detectives contacted Dr. Fowler immediately with the update. They explained that Kim worked in the hospital's operating room and asked what drugs she might have had access to that would be hard to trace. Fowler's medical instincts kicked in. There was one drug that fit the description perfectly: succinylcholine, a fast-acting paralytic. It was used in surgeries to temporarily paralyze patients. Once administered, it shuts down all voluntary muscles, including the chest and diaphragm, leaving the victim unable to breathe. And the worst part? The drug breaks down so rapidly into naturally occurring compounds that it becomes virtually undetectable after just a few minutes. Poison, they noted, is often the weapon of choice in spousal killings, particularly when the perpetrator lacks the physical strength to overpower the victim. It's silent. It's secretive. And it leaves almost nothing behind. Investigators believed Kim had stolen succinylcholine from the hospital and used it to murder her husband. Now they needed proof. They interviewed several of her co-workers at Holy Cross Hospital. One of them, Kenneth Burgess, had a criminal history, and, perhaps because of that, Kim may have seen him as someone she could manipulate. Kenneth finally told detectives that Kim had once approached him with a disturbing question: "Hey Ken, how much would you charge to kill my husband?" He had laughed it off, assuming it was just dark humor, but remembered joking back, "Just stick him with some succinylcholine and put him to sleep forever." That bizarre conversation became the centerpiece of the investigation. The team knew they had to get Kim on record. So they set a trap. Ken agreed to call her under surveillance. He began by offering condolences, then subtly shifted the conversation back to their earlier discussion. Kim's tone changed. She became nervous, defensive. "You know I was kidding, right?" she asked. "You understand that, Ken, right? That was just a joke." But when Ken pushed a little harder, her guard dropped. She didn't deny the conversation. In fact, she confirmed it and told him, "You gave me some really good advice that day." That advice, of course, had been to use succinylcholine. The case against Kimberly Rico was finally taking shape, but investigators needed more to take it to court. Just as they were preparing an arrest warrant, they received a call. Kim had attempted suicide. Detectives rushed to the hospital. Kim was shaken, panicked, and clearly beginning to unravel. One detective sat beside her, trying to comfort her. Through tears, she whispered, "I did it." The detective leaned in closer, unsure if he'd heard her right. But before she could repeat it, her lawyer entered the room, and just like that, the wall went back up. She said nothing more. Still, that hospital bed confession was enough. Prosecutors moved forward with the arrest. At Kim's home, they found more damning evidence: a life insurance policy she had taken out on Stephen. Divorce would have been messy, financially and emotionally. Murder, she must have thought, was faster. Everything started to fit together. Kimberly had taken off work the day before the couple left for their weekend getaway. That was when she visited the liquor store, buying cigars and beer she would later claim Stephen brought himself. That night, in the resort cottage, she likely seduced him. While they were intimate, she injected him with succinylcholine. Then she watched him die. The physical evidence was thin, no obvious signs of trauma, no traces of the drug in his body. But the circumstantial evidence painted a clear picture. Prosecutors worried that without direct proof, they couldn't convince a jury. Kimberly Rico's trial began in January 1999. Dr. Fowler explained to the jury how succinylcholine worked, how it paralyzed the victim within seconds and broke down in the body so completely that it left no forensic trace. It acted for only 4 to 8 minutes. After that, it was gone. But what couldn't be erased was the testimony. The statements. The lies. The admissions. They knew Stephen had died before the fire. They had a witness who said Kim planned to kill him using an untraceable drug. They knew she had access to it. The pieces clicked into place. The jury agreed. Kimberly Rico was found guilty of first-degree arson and first-degree murder. Prosecutors believed, and the jury concurred, that she had used succinylcholine. Though they couldn't detect it, the web of evidence around her left little doubt. She was sentenced to life in prison. In the aftermath, those who had once defended her came to terms with the truth. One friend admitted he felt like a fool. He had ignored the red flags. Another revealed something poignant. Their daughter, Stephanie, had been named after Stephen. They'd called her Stevie growing up, a gesture meant to honor him. In the end, this case wasn't solved with one big discovery. It was built piece by piece, layer by layer. The work of detectives, medical examiners, and witnesses came together to reveal the truth. And while some of the puzzle may have been missing, the picture was still unmistakable. Kimberly Rico was guilty.